A video clip uploaded by an anonymous account on a video-sharing platform, only 37 seconds long, left the entire Deerbrook community in Vermont in stunned silence. In the blurry frame lit by an old fluorescent lamp, a young man in his early 20s, with sunken eyes and trembling hands, whispered a single sentence in a choked voice: "I'm not the only one. 3 more are still alive." Just a few hours later, the video was taken down, but by then, it had already spread across local forum groups and reopened a wound thought to have been buried for 13 years. On November 3, 2010, a school bus carrying students from Deerbrook High School departed from the Wildridge ski resort after a late autumn field trip. On board were 21 people, including 18 students, 2 accompanying teachers, and the driver. The bus never returned. Months of searching yielded nothing. No signal, no witnesses, no trace of a crash or accident. Almost all that remained was a looming question mark and a grief with no answer. Only one student found 3 days later. Wandering along Route 14 was a surviving clue. He was believed to remember nothing, only repeating disjointed phrases. Since then, not a single word had been heard from him until 13 years later. With that video, people began asking again, what really happened on that bus? Before we begin, subscribe to the channel to follow along with stories of forgotten disappearances, because there are names that have never been called again. On November 3, 2010, the sky over Vermont was a quiet gray in the early morning mist in the back lot of Deerbrook High School. Bus number 74, a deep yellow vehicle with faded paint on one side, slowly rolled out, carrying 18 students, 2 teachers, and 1 driver out through the school gates. They departed at 7:37 in the morning, several minutes behind schedule, heading toward the Wildridge ski resort, the site of their late-season field trip. The route had been pre-planned: follow Route 27, turn onto Highway 9, ascend a gentle slope, then merge with Route 14 to reach Wildridge. Total distance, approximately 70 miles. Security cameras recorded the bus's final sighting as it passed through the last residential area of Deerbrook at 7:49. After that, it entered a sparsely wooded area, where phone signals thinned and the road became more winding. At around 9:02 in the morning, a student named Micah sent a text to his mother. "Think we're stopping. Looks like a gas station. Mr. Kells went to get coffee." That message would later become the last known signal from anyone on board. The bus was believed to have stopped at the Thorn Pine gas station, a small roadside stop just 24 miles from Wildridge. The station owner recalled a yellow school bus stopping by for about 10 minutes, but he could not remember which direction it took afterward, because just past the station, the road split in 2. One branch led straight to Wildridge. The other was Route 34, narrow and rarely used. And from that point on, the bus was never seen again. Wildridge received no call from the school or the accompanying teachers. They assumed the trip had been canceled at the last minute. Deerbrook High School showed no concern that afternoon. Delays were common due to extended skiing sessions or traffic. It wasn't until after 7 in the evening, when parents began gathering at the school gates and calling unanswered phones, that worry turned into panic. At 7:40, Deerbrook Town Police were officially notified. An hour later, the first large-scale search operation was launched. The route from Deerbrook to Wildridge was divided into 3 sections, each assigned to a different team: local police, the Vermont State Police, and the Forest Rescue Unit. They traced every mile, examining dirt tracks, ravines, curves, and even the small lakes flanking the road. The bus, nearly 7 tons in weight, could not have vanished without a trace. Yet, through that night, and the entire following day, not a single tire mark, not a single piece of debris, not one dropped item was found. On Friday, November 5th, a rescue department helicopter scanned the entire wooded area between Highways 9 and 34. Result: no heat signatures, no radio responses. Then, early in the morning on November 6th, 3 days after the disappearance, a postal worker delivering mail spotted a teenage boy walking along the shoulder of Route 14, near the fork leading into the town of Yelvington. He was wearing a soaked gray hoodie, barefoot, and barely conscious. He carried no identification, except for a crumpled student card. His name was Joran Lemack, 15 years old, one of the students aboard bus number 74. Joran was taken to the regional medical center, though he bore no visible injuries. He suffered from mild hypothermia and was unable to communicate coherently. When questioned, he only repeated one phrase, "Not that road, not that road." This discovery shifted the entire search operation, now focused on unusual turnoffs along Route 34. Despite the addition of over 100 personnel, drones, and a special terrain expedition team, the result remained the same. The bus, along with the remaining 20 people, had vanished without a trace. Of the 18 students who boarded bus number 74 that morning, only one returned, Joran Lemack, the boy who was found 3 days later, walking barefoot along the shoulder of Route 14, with scattered memories and no clear recollection. But the strangest thing was this. In the 13 years that followed, Joran never once mentioned any of his 17 classmates, as if those names had never existed. And for that reason, the others gradually became mere numbers, nameless, fading from the town's collective memory, all except a few, whose presence, even in the smallest of details, left an indelible mark that could not be erased. One of them was Lyle Mendez, 16 years old. Lyle was not a top student, nor part of any notable group, but he left an impression through his unwavering habits, always arriving at school at 5:57 in the morning, sitting on the stone bench near the security office, opening a small wooden box to repair electronic components. That box belonged to his father, a retired electrician who had suffered a stroke, and Lyle treated it as something inseparable. Lyle didn't use a phone, even though his parents had bought him a new LG model. When police inspected his locker after the disappearance, the phone was still in its original box, unopened, stored in the locked drawer. Teachers trusted him for his meticulousness. When the projector in the math classroom broke, it was Lyle who reconnected the HDMI port using a temporary soldering fix. A library camera captured him reassembling the LAN port after a cable had snapped. On the morning of the disappearance, Lyle sat near the back, on the right-hand side, beside the emergency exit. Another student, who also went missing, later said that Lyle was wearing wired headphones, still keeping his habit of using only the left earpiece. His gray-blue backpack, the wooden box, and those headphones, none of them were ever found. The second was Aria Kentwell, 14 years old, who had only transferred to Deerbrook at the start of the semester. Just 2 months before the trip, Aria was not outgoing. She spoke little, rarely smiled, and often sat alone at the edge of the backyard, near the library wall, but she had a habit of drawing, and not flowers or casual sketches, in one assignment. She submitted a diagram of the Deerbrook Library, accurate to every auxiliary step. Though she had never seen the actual floor plan, once, she sketched the shape of the classroom windows, including their height ratios relative to the ground. The drawing was confiscated by a teacher, who deemed it too unusual. Aria always carried 2 notebooks in her backpack, a main notebook for class, and a small navy blue notebook filled with short symbols, like a code. No one ever understood what it meant, strikingly. Aria had not initially registered for the field trip. Her name was absent from the list sent to the Department of Education 10 days prior. But on November 2nd, just 1 day before departure, her mother called to request a last-minute addition. The reason? Aria was feeling better after a mild fever. The request was approved since there were still available seats. School cameras captured Aria as the last student to step onto the bus. An orange hair tie in her long curly hair was the most vivid detail in the cold gray frame of that November morning. No one ever saw Aria again. Her navy blue notebook, like Lyle's wooden box, was never found. And in the years that followed, when journalists asked Joran Lemack, during his rare therapeutic interviews, whether he remembered anyone from that day, he would only shake his head. No one. No names. No faces. That silence, in a way, only made people remember the names that had vanished all the more. On the night of November 3rd, when the school bus failed to return as scheduled, the search was launched immediately, marking the largest scale operation in western Vermont in the past 10 years. Initially, the leading theory was a mountain road accident. The route from Deerbrook to Wildridge included many sharp turns and slick surfaces due to wet leaves and thick autumn fog. Vermont State Police focused on surveying all ravines, cliff edges, and areas prone to tire slippage. However, after 48 hours with no trace, no tire marks, no wreckage, no dropped items, the search teams began to realize that something didn't add up. One of the first major oversights stemmed from a misdirected search grid. On the first day, rescue teams primarily followed the main route, Route 27, Highway 9, Route 14. They overlooked the small turnoff just past Thornpine Gas Station, Route 34, which was commonly excluded due to being narrow, steep, and officially closed to school buses. It wasn't until the fourth day, after Joran Lemack was found along Route 14, and after confirming that his body bore no scrapes or injuries consistent with a crash, that the investigation shifted toward the possibility that the bus had taken a wrong turn, or had deliberately entered a restricted road. However, the video footage from Thornpine Gas Station was no help. The station's security system had been damaged during a late October storm and hadn't yet been repaired. The only witness, Mr. Carlton, the station owner, vaguely recalled a yellow bus stopping by for about 10 minutes that morning, but wasn't certain if it was the Deerbrook school bus. Moreover, he hadn't noticed which direction the bus took afterward. He had been busy ringing up a trucker. Another oversight was the insufficient analysis of the students' phone signals at the time of disappearance. Police recovered only 3 final signals, one message from Micah at 9:02 and 2 weather app auto updates at 9:08. After that, all phones went silent. But it wasn't until 10 days later that a warrant was issued to examine detailed location histories from the carrier. By then, much of the data had been purged by the system's automatic cycle. In addition, a small inconsistency in the student roster went unnoticed. The school's internal records initially listed 17 participating students, while the list submitted to the Department of Education showed 18 names, due to the last-minute addition of Aria Kentwell. This discrepancy led early media reports to consistently misstate the total. Many reported 17 students, 2 teachers, 1 driver, when the true number was 21 people on board. This confusion sparked speculation that a student may have gotten on by mistake or wasn't officially listed, but the school later admitted the roster had been updated too late and that the revised list had not been forwarded to police in time. As for the vehicle itself, bus number 74 was an International CE model from 2001, regularly maintained. Notably, however, its GPS system, mandated for all school buses since 2009, had been removed for repairs 3 months earlier and had not yet been reinstalled. The school transportation department stated they were awaiting replacement equipment and had trusted the route's safety, so did not report the removal to the coordination office. With no GPS, no dash cam, and no signals from onboard devices, all leads grew dim. Another detail that was underestimated during the first week of investigation involved Joran's shoes. When found, he was barefoot, but upon inspection, his feet showed no cuts, no calluses, and were not dirty enough to suggest he had walked a long distance through the forest. This led to a theory that he had been dropped off close to the main road, but lacking concrete evidence. The idea was set aside after nearly 3 weeks, with no further discoveries. The investigation shifted to a long-term monitoring status. The press gradually withdrew from Deerbrook. Some local papers continued to publish updates, but no new information emerged. Police declared the case suspended, pending any significant new leads. But after all the evidence, diagrams, and lost phone signals, what remained was an empty space between 2 turnoffs, a broken video feed, and a silent boy sitting in a treatment room that no one could decipher. But after all the maps, the facts, and the missed turns, what remained was the waiting of those who never gave up. In the town of Deerbrook, time did not pass in the usual way after November 3rd, 2010, every autumn morning afterward. Cars would still stop in front of the high school, where parents once waited to pick up their children, as if, by standing there long enough. Bus number 74 would suddenly emerge from the final bend. Lyle Mendez's father, Mr. Taryn, still went to the family's old garage every weekend, where he and his son once fixed small electronics for neighbors. Lyle's wooden toolbox, a birthday gift from Mr. Taryn in 8th grade, sat neatly on the workbench, untouched. For the first 4 years after the disappearance, he didn't change the garage lock, didn't rearrange the tool drawers, and kept the wooden stool where Lyle used to sit though its legs had begun to rot. He was once invited to a school memorial, where families brought photos and shared stories, but he said nothing. When the host asked if anyone wanted to speak about Lyle, he simply stood, walked outside, and pulled from his coat pocket a tangled earphone cord, something found in his son's desk. He tied it into a loop, then tucked it into his wallet. Not everyone could remain silent. Some teachers could no longer return to the classroom. Mr. Franick, the chemistry teacher, was the first to resign, just 1 month after the disappearance. In his personal journal, later published by his daughter, he wrote, "I remember very clearly seeing Lyle in the hallway that morning. At 7:20, he wasn't carrying his backpack. I thought it was strange, but I didn't ask." That line was repeated 4 times on the same page. Another teacher, Ms. Matea, who taught art, once shared her memory of Aria during a private session. She didn't just draw, she studied geometry as if trying to find a way through. The last time I saw the blue notebook, she was hurriedly folding it shut as I entered the room. I should have asked what she was hiding. She left teaching a year after the incident. When she returned, she only taught part-time and refused to enter classroom B6. The Kentwells, Aria's parents, were different. They didn't stay in Deerbrook after the event. Just 3 weeks later, they left town without leaving a new address. Yet, in the school library, one package remained, returned multiple times, a yellow envelope, without a stamp, no sender listed, bearing only one line typed in block letters, "Return if found." Inside was a copy of the library floor plan, the same one Aria had submitted. One corner of the copy was smudged, but the pencil marks remained visible. A secondary hallway not present in the official blueprint, a hallway later confirmed to exist, built temporarily during emergency renovations in 1996, and subsequently forgotten in the official records. Other teachers carried their own silences. Ms. Lamara, the math teacher on the bus, had been beloved by students for telling jokes during class. After the incident, many mistakenly thought she was the survivor, but in truth, she was among the missing. Her sister, also a teacher, once wrote in a letter to the local press, "There is nothing more terrifying than hearing people speak of my sister as if she never existed, as if her name were just a misprint on the passenger list." At the school, for an entire year after the event, no one dared reopen Classroom B6, the classroom used by most of the students on the trip. The new principal, appointed at the end of 2011, was the first to propose reusing it, but the idea was unanimously opposed by the parent council. The classroom was later repurposed as a storage room, then left vacant entirely from 2015 onward. One unexplained detail: the whiteboard in room B6, though wiped clean many times, still bore faint chalk markings, as if written by a left hand. Some said it was the math problem from the day before the trip. Others said it wasn't the handwriting of any teacher who had ever taught there. Years later, students from later classes began to recount strange impressions. A girl named Hallie once said that, during the 2016 school year, whenever she sat in the same seat Aria once used, she always felt as if someone were recording her movements. During a surprise quiz, Hallie found a slip of paper under the desk, a diagram of the school's emergency exits, drawn in pencil lines identical to Aria's known sketches. The paper was confiscated. The school declined to comment. Another group of students, in their 2020 graduation project, proposed renaming the eastern access path behind the school from South Ridge to the Forgetting Path. Though the proposal was rejected, the phrase spread through the school's internal social networks, and to this day is still used unofficially. In 2018, a stranger appeared at a spontaneous memorial. No one knew their name. The person said nothing, only left a small wooden box at the school gate. Inside was a broken white wired earphone and a strip of tape with a handwritten note, "Left side only." No one knew what it meant, but some believed it referred to how Lyle used to wear his headphones. Only one side, the left, and the model of the earphone. It was the exact kind Lyle had used. Discontinued since 2009. Joran Lemack, the only one who returned, was taken out of state by his family. For the first 5 years, no media outlet was able to reach him. In 2017, a brief interview appeared in the Vanished column of a local magazine. Quoting his therapist, He doesn't reject the memory. He has no memory, as if the entire period had been wiped clean, smooth like a whiteboard, no place to hold on to. But in Joran's treatment room, there was always one object he kept with him, though no one ever mentioned it, a burnt orange hair tie, singed on one side. No one knows where Joran found it. It was not until April of 2023, nearly 13 years after the disappearance, that the case was suddenly reopened. It all began with an old electronic device brought to a secondhand shop in Rutland, nearly 90 miles from Deerbrook. A young man of unknown identity, wearing a baseball cap, carried a worn wooden box filled with old circuit boards, adapters, capacitors, and a disassembled VHF signal receiver, the kind once used in radio communication systems from the early 2000s. The shop owner, Mr. Clint Radmore, had no intention of keeping the equipment, but when testing the receiver, he noticed a handwritten list of frequencies taped to the back. One of those frequencies matched exactly with the secure band assigned to Vermont school bus systems from 2009 to 2012. He alerted a friend who worked as a technician for the state's transportation maintenance unit, and from there, the device was turned over to state investigators. Upon reviewing the store's security footage, they discovered something unexpected. The person who brought in the device arrived alone, without a vehicle, and did not appear in any nearby surveillance cameras before or after the moment. The footage only captured his back, tall and thin, walking slowly, and notably, the index finger on his right hand did not bend fully, one store employee recalled. He pushed the box onto the counter using his whole palm, like he couldn't grip it. When cross-referencing medical records of the missing students, investigators found that Micah Ridland, one of the students, had broken his right index finger in 6th grade, leaving a minor lasting deformity. But there was no definitive proof of the man's identity. After engineers restored the receiver's circuitry, they discovered it still held an 11-second burst of static, structured similarly to the type of auto-position signal bus number 74 should have transmitted, had its GPS not been removed. The decoded approximate coordinates pointed to a narrow junction between Route 34 and an abandoned trail once called Cribber's Path, removed from maps in 1998 due to landslides. This path had once led to an old television broadcast station, operational during the 1980s but closed since 2002. A new investigative team was assembled, entering Cribber's Path for the first time in over 2 decades. It took them nearly 10 days to clear the way, and upon reaching the station, they did not find the bus, but they did find a secondary storage bunker, its entrance obscured by vines and fallen rock. The air inside was heavy and metallic. Faded red stripes ran along the walls like directional markers, many streaked and smeared. Near a corner, a small medical cabinet had been forced open, with child-sized handprints visible on the dusty glass, on the dusty wooden floor. They found claw marks, scraps of paper, and one object that left the entire team silent. A burnt orange hair tie, identical to the one Aria Kentwell used to wear, scorched on one side. Camera footage showed the first person to spot the object stood still for 3 minutes, saying nothing. Others approached, also wordless. No one gave the order to log the evidence. No one reacted. It was only after some time that the team leader finally spoke a single sentence. "We need an evidence preservation box." Upon forensic examination, the hair tie contained molecular traces matching the hair sample Aria's family had stored, with a match of 98.9%. In a cracked floorboard, they also found a decayed piece of paper identified as a page from the blue notebook. On it were 3 hand-drawn symbols, 3 misaligned triangles, with no explanation. Cryptographers could not decipher their meaning, but confirmed the handwriting matched Aria's. 2 weeks later, a video appeared online, 37 seconds long, showing a young man sitting in an empty room, arms wrapped around his knees, eyes downcast, whispering, "I'm not the only one. 3 more are still alive." The voice was confirmed by audio analysis, Joran Lemack. The video was removed after a few hours, but it was enough to reignite everything. Police went to the treatment facility in South Portland, where Joran had been living under a psychological care program, only to find that he had disappeared. No one had seen him leave. Internal surveillance showed him exiting his room early that morning with a small backpack, and then no further trace. Subsequent cameras registered no movement. In Joran's bedside drawer, they found a new notebook, completely blank, except for the first page, a drawing of the same 3 triangle symbols found in the Cribbers Ridge bunker. Beneath the symbols was a handwritten line. Only when the light goes completely out can the voices of the names never spoken be heard. 3 months after the final video, a 198-page investigative report was released internally by the Vermont Task Force for the first time in 13 years. The entire sequence of events behind the disappearance of bus number 74 was reconstructed, not from testimonies, but from fragments gathered in places few had thought to look. The bus had turned onto Route 34 after leaving Thornpine gas station. This was no accident. Police confirmed that the driver, Dwight Gelroy, had once worked as a television technician during the 1980s and had known connections to the abandoned Cribbers Ridge broadcast station. In his home, which had remained unsearched for 10 years due to legal limitations, a copy of the Cribbers station route map was found, along with an old calendar with November 3rd, 2010, circled. Further investigation revealed that Gelroy had a mild brain tumor and showed signs of paranoia as early as 2009. Though it had gone undetected due to his solitary lifestyle. Notebook entries in his home, many of them disordered, described a place untouched by interference, a path out of the signal waves, and children must be protected before they're watched. From this, a theory emerged that the bus had been deliberately driven into the auxiliary bunker beneath the old broadcast station, once used as a signal shielding shelter during the Cold War, and long since decommissioned. Pieces of evidence began to align. The wooden box of electronic equipment bore Lyle's fingerprints. The notebook matched Aria's handwriting. The hair tie carried her DNA. There were scratch marks on the wooden floor, remnants of packaged food from 2009, and, most notably, a split in the floorboards. Beneath it, 2 sheets of hallway diagrams were found, matching Aria's drawing style. No one knows exactly what happened in the bunker afterward, but signs indicated the group of students had attempted to escape after several days. The auxiliary hatch showed signs of being pried open, and a tunnel exit had exploded due to an electrical short. Some may have gotten out, including Joran and the 3 others he mentioned. Why none of them ever surfaced remains unanswered. A quiet theory was proposed. The 3 may never have left Vermont at all. They might have lived under new identities or been forced into silence. Joran's departure from the treatment facility and the notebook he left behind were seen as his attempt to break that silence. But then Joran vanished again. No trace, no cameras, no witnesses to his exit, no alarms were triggered. As staff assumed he had been picked up by a guardian, bus number 74 has still never been found. Police excavated the area surrounding the old bunker, but the terrain had shifted after a major flood in 2011. Some parts of the bunker had collapsed and were no longer accessible. No one could confirm whether the bus had ever been hidden there, or if it had simply served as a temporary shelter. No trace of the driver, Gelroy, was ever found. He may have died in the bunker or escaped through a side passage before it collapsed. In September of 2023, Deerbrook High held its first candlelight vigil in nearly a decade. No invitations were sent. No agenda was announced. But at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening, hundreds of people gathered, many bringing old flashlights, some students wearing orange bands. And in one corner of the schoolyard, someone had tied up a tangled earphone cord. There were no speeches that night, but many said that, at the far end of the yard, a young man in a gray hoodie stood silently, head bowed. When people turned to look again, he was gone. No one could say for sure if it was Joran, but no one tried to chase him. The story didn't end with resolution, but with acceptance that some journeys don't need to be completed. It is enough to know that, no matter how many years pass. Some names are still remembered. If you found this story meaningful, please leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel, because many disappearances have never been told.